We are super happy to host our friend Nick today. Hello, Nick.
Hello, nice to meet you all.
Good to see you. Nick, you are a product coach.
I
You are
am.
also the founder of Story Matter. I don't know if you want to share with us some line about your beautiful company. I'm sure you will.
I
Um,
will.
it's great. I will give you the mic in a few minutes, but before that, I want to thank you all for being there tonight with us. And I want to share with you guys the only rule of the game for tonight, which is that we want this moment to drive conversations between you and Nick. So please do not hesitate to ask all the questions you might have. For that, you can use the chat or the question, like the Q feature you see on the left part of the screen. We'll take every question at the end of the talk. So, Nick, you'll be talking about your topic for about like 20-30 minutes, and then we'll have a 15-minute QA session. Okay?
Perfect.
Cool. So, Nick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So, hi everyone. It's great to be here. I'm going to try and slow down and make sure that my use of English is not a barrier to our international audience. So, I'm going to talk to you today about a really powerful product discovery technique called a design sprint. I don't know how many of you have been involved in or run design sprints. I've pitched this for an audience that probably hasn't run design sprints before, or at least is looking for ways to improve the outcomes from design sprints. So we'll get into that. The reason I've chosen design sprints is because I believe they're a really powerful way for product squads to accelerate their decision making and to massively increase the speed at which they can work and the impact that they can deliver. And that's what we're all here to do. One second. There we go. We've got it going. So who am I? Well, I'm Nick Jemetta. Thank you for the kind introduction. I'm based in the UK and I'm the founder of Stories Matter. Stories Matter exists to unlock potential for individuals and for businesses. And what's quite interesting about Stories Matter is that I operate in two domains that seem disparate but actually come together in a really powerful, beautiful way for me and my clients. So I'm a product coach and an advisor, and I'm focused there on how to build empowered product teams that deliver meaningful outcomes. But I'm also a mental health campaigner and a mental health speaker. And that part of my world is focused around creating cultures in which mental health is seen as an asset and a strength, and where we can cultivate cultures that allow people to thrive. And it's probably pretty obvious why those two worlds go together, because great products are made by great people, and great people only exist if they look after themselves and if the businesses in which they work allow them to thrive, to feel, to speak openly, to have psychological safety. So that's why I'm here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the session. So what do I do? I've kind of touched on some of these, but I'm very much around value creation, impact, but also shifting mindsets and growing people. I'm super passionate about the mindset and the growth piece. I deliver that in lots of different ways. I run product coaching programs for product leaders and product squads. I facilitate design sprints, which is handy. And I've facilitated and run workshops, and I also provide advisory services to founders and product leadership teams. Now, if I was in the room with you, I might ask you to input, but given the time constraint, this is going to be a rhetorical question, which I'm going to answer for you. So, what is our job in product and design? For me, it's about impact. It's about meaningful, sustainable impact. And very often, a lot of the language around impact is that impact is created by the delivery of working software, the delivery of digital products. I'm going to put it to you that there's a stage before that, and that's where the magic happens for product managers, product teams, and designers. It's the discovery phase. And the discovery phase is where we make sure that we're targeting the right impact and that we're targeting the right areas that create that meaningful impact and create sustainable impact. We're trying to build the right things, because we don't create the right impact if we build the wrong things or we solve the wrong problem for the wrong customers. And hopefully you'll all be very familiar with this, but the joy of our job is in discovery. It's in learning. It's in figuring out and validating the risks, usability, viability, feasibility. And it's about solving problems. We are problem solvers at heart. So why a design sprint? Like, why is that valuable if our job is to create impact and to uncover and discover? Well, a design sprint is a great way of answering critical business questions, which is what we're here to do. We're here to solve problems that create value for our customers and for the business. And it's to ensure that we're building the right things for customers. If anyone's interested, there's a great video, if you Google it, from Product Tank San Francisco in 2017, where they did a whole session on the design sprint and the types and flavors of design sprints. I'm not going to go into the specifics now, but design sprints are one of the most flexible techniques that you can have in your product armory. For me, design sprints help us do our job better in 3 specific ways. Number 1, clarity. Design sprints help us bring clarity to our customers, to our preferences, to their problems, to their unmet needs. Clarity to our business. So the problems that exist, the opportunities, and really importantly, the assumptions or the blind spots. And I've already touched upon it. Clarity on the product risks that we're all trying to manage. So that's value, viability, feasibility, usability. Design sprints help us drive alignment. And in the work I do as a coach, alignment is often one of the biggest challenges that teams face. And a design sprint is a fantastic way of creating alignment. And the alignment can be created along lots of different dimensions. It can be with your business partners and stakeholders. It can be with your customers. It can be within your own team. And it can be with the squads and the teams that are supporting you in the delivery of the outcomes and the goals that you're going after. The best bit about a design sprint, though, other than the fact it's a huge amount of fun for anyone that has done one, is a design sprint is a platform for momentum and forward progress. And it's momentum in lots of different areas. It's momentum to generate insight. It's momentum to learn. It's momentum towards a new mindset. It's momentum to experiment, to ship, to iterate. And I hope I'm not selling a dream here. As you'll find out later, design sprints are not a magic wand, but they really can be incredibly powerful in driving lots of these positive behaviors that many of you, no doubt, would benefit from within your own teams and within the own problem spaces that you're solving for. Now, when Roxanne and I spoke about this session, she was super clear with me, and it made total sense that her audience wants case studies, right? You want something to hang your hat on. So I've framed this session around a problem that I faced as a product manager. I won't go into lots of detail about the problem because I don't want to make it overly complicated, but I'm just going to give you a high-level view as to what we were experiencing and why we felt design sprint was the way to go. So when I worked at Argos, which is a big retailer in the UK, a general merchandise retailer, we were seeing in the data, both qualitative and quantitative, that our customers were experiencing a problem. When customers were searching online, in this case for a webcam, the assumption was that anything shown on that list was in stock. And the reason for that assumption was driven substantially by the fact that customers have got very used to shopping with Amazon, where their distribution model is centralized and generally most things are in stock or on back order. Argos was a multi-channel retailer with thousands of shops. So its logistics model worked in a different way, but customers came shopping with Argos with the Amazon mental model. Oh, wrong way, sorry. When customers were choosing, in this case, the webcam that they were interested in, they came to the product detail page, which you're seeing here, with an assumption that the item was out of stock or was in stock. 80% of customers would use this action here, and they would check the stock level in their town or in their postcode. And unfortunately, 20% of those customers would find that the item was out of stock. Incredibly frustrating, because you feel like you've wasted your time. And what we then started seeing is this very frustrating behavior where customers would ping pong between a list and the details, desperately trying to find a product that's in stock. And you can only imagine what that's like if you're trying to find a present for your child's birthday, or trying to find something the day before Christmas. It can be stressful. And we were seeing a lot of this come through in the data. There was loads of feedback from customers that it was a really poor experience. There was a lot of dissatisfaction from customers, and it was having a lot of detrimental impacts across the business. So why did that make it the perfect opportunity for a design sprint? As you've heard, it was significant and impactful as a business problem, number one. It was really controversial because there were lots of ways to solve the problem. There were lots of stakeholders that believe we should have already got to solving this problem, but there were good reasons why we hadn't, most notably the enabling technology. And it's an incredibly gnarly, complicated problem. And they're the sorts of problems that design sprints eat for breakfast. And there were lots of solutions out there, which led to a lot of opinions and major misalignment. So this set us up really nicely to head into a design sprint. When I ran this design sprint at Argos, it was the first time it had ever been done. So I had to do, my job as PM was to do a lot of media work, I would say, a lot of influencing, a lot of evangelizing about why we were doing this. But this is the framework that we adopted, and this is the framework that you're going to find when you do your own research on design sprints. And I have seeded some resources at the end of the session. The high level intention of the sprint is you go from problem definition to a validated prototype that's been tested with customers within 5 days. With a design sprint, you get the most from it if you're unconstrained in your thinking. So if you try to ignore the limits within your current technology stack or within your current logistics network, for example, normally, unless you're running a design sprint to look at a moonshot or something that's 5 or 10 years into the future, you need to have some kind of semblance of a limit as to what's possible. But certainly you need to try and remove the day-to-day constraints that you're working within. I'm going to break the framework down into its constituent parts, but up here in the top right, I've just mapped out the individuals or the roles that you need within the sprint team. You need a sponsor, a senior leader that believes and recognizes the problem in the same way that the product manager does or that the squad does. You need someone in the team who can make a decision, and that is normally the product manager because that's one of the roles. A facilitator is super helpful to keep conversations moving to get the team unstuck. It can be done by someone external like me. It can be done by potentially a coach you've got in-house, or if there's someone in your team that feels equipped to facilitate, then they can do that as well. Don't let the lack of specialist skills stop you running a design sprint, because we certainly didn't. And then you need the other core skill sets that any great product squad needs. You need an amazing designer who can prototype. You need an engineer who is empowered and engaged and wants to be involved in understanding problems at a very, very early stage. And then you need your experts, your subject matter experts, your partners, your stakeholders. You'll see a faint dotted line around the sponsor and the experts. That's there to indicate that those people are fluid across the sprint. You're not going to need them there for every day, for every activity. You bring them in when you need them. Beyond that, the decider, facilitator, designer, and engineers are the kind of crux of that sprint team. So here we go. Stage 1, map and target, or understand and define, as it's shown there. So what I'm going to do at each stage is talk to you about the outcome that we're trying to get to as a result of each of the phases, each of the days. And I'm going to touch on some of the approaches, some of the product discovery techniques that are in use. I've marked those with the red star. This is not exhaustive, and I'm not here to lecture you. I'm just here to hopefully inspire you and give you a perspective on what worked for me and for the team. So stage 1, what's the outcome? We're trying to map the problem space, trying to understand the problem from a customer and a business point of view. We're trying to understand what the current journey is. And what we need to do is get to an understanding of the target persona that we're trying to solve for and the use cases. We're under time constraints. We've got 5 days and we've got 1 day for this phase. So we can't boil the ocean, but equally, as I've said earlier, we need to try and push our thinking further out than what we see and what we're constrained by within our day-to-day. We need to be gathering insight and asking the experts. This is where the experts come in. They help us set the scene. They help us understand perspectives that are important to the overall experience, which we may not be directly aware of in the work that we do day to day. As we start to unpeel the layers of the onion, some frameworks that hopefully you might recognize start coming into play. We want to start understanding customers' pains and gains, their mental models. We can use frameworks like jobs to be done, if that's a framework that yields value for you. We can also start to use frameworks like how might we. So you treat the discussion with experts like a customer interview, like you're a journalist. When something curious or thought-provoking or interesting or controversial comes up, pin it as a how might we. And I should sidestep out slightly just for a second to say that the techniques here can be used in a virtual setting, a physical setting, or hybrid. When I ran the design sprint, and you're going to see some of the pictures shortly, it was in person. But these can be very, very easily run as a hybrid or a virtual model. So we're starting to tease out the how might we statements to try and stretch our thinking into more of a discovery ideation mindset. We need to come up with some kind of end-to-end journey map. We need to be thinking about the actors who are at play. We need to be thinking about what's happening back of stage, so in our back ends, and also how the customer interacts with that. And you want to be capturing riskiest assumptions to test, or your RATs. Now, I don't know whether or not I coined this phrase. I don't remember hearing it before I coined it at Argos, but having since Googled it, I'm pretty sure I can't lay claim. But amongst us, I'll say it's mine. And the riskiest assumptions to test are really trying to identify those assumptions that can make or break your existing journeys and the new solutions that you propose, because those assumptions need to be turned into testable hypotheses, and they're the things that we're going to be testing for as part of our customer validation. So as promised, these are photos, and I kind of wish I could go back in time and say, when you take the photos, you're probably going to need these for loads of awesome presentations with cool people, because you can see some of the angles are off, some of the crispness of the photos is not there, but hopefully you can see, this is what it's like. It's raw. We were using flipboards, flip charts, terrible drawings, blue tack and sellotape. These are the tools of great product teams. And you can see here, we're pulling out some of our riskiest assumptions to test. So for example, if we're thinking about availability, a risky assumption is that customers on a listing page, because it's a different mental model to a detail page, will give us their location. That customers will understand why we're asking for their location when their mental model is, I've searched for webcams and you're showing me 500 options. The mental model I talked about, stuff comes from a central location, it's sent to the stores. We needed to understand that. And this is just more exploration of target customer persona use cases. As I say, the angle is terrible, and my past self really should have thought about front on photos. Stage 2, we're going to move into sketching now. This is a super fun phase. It's a phase I struggled with the most because I'm so bad at drawing, and I'm still terrible at drawing. So I really apologize to the designers on the call, because I wish I had some of your superpower, frankly. Drawing is one thing I really can't get on with. I'm learning. So the outcome for stage 2, we're trying to get clear now on our candidate solutions. So in phase 1, we've zoned in on the problem space that we want to be tackling. So for us in the availability example, we could have tackled availability at lots of different stages of the journey, but we chose specific use cases from the listing page to the detail page. And I think the scenario we ended up coming up with was that someone's kettle had broken. They were working in London and commuting back outside of London, and they wanted to get a kettle that was near their office location. That was the sort of very specific scenario we got into. But what we're doing at sketching stage is taking the problem space, which would be surfacing availability in the lister. And the first step is seeking inspiration. So you use something like lightning demos. So you all take 2 to 3 minutes to share inspiration, competitor insight, anything that has a correlation to the problem space and gives you some kind of inspiration or energy or alternative perspective. 4-step sketching, so much fun. Some of this process is done individually, some of it is done as a group, but in what you end up with is a solution sketch. So you go through these phases. Crazy eights is where you literally split a piece of paper into 8 boxes and you draw up 8 different solutions to solve one problem. The solution sketch is the stage where all of the work you've done individually and as a group comes together, and the solution has to be presented to the group without you saying anything. And you can see now why drawing and clear articulation of the user flow, the UI, the user states is so crucial. It's a skill that I think more of us should be able to develop. Too often we rely on the ability to orally communicate, but the power of visual, as many of you all know, really comes into its own here. More photos. I don't think Diogo here realised I was taking a shot of him, but this just brings it to life. You can see us, around the board collaborating. You can see we move from the left, the early part of the sketching, to the right, where we've literally filled a wall with post-it notes, with terrible sketches, with ideas and solutions to our problem. Just a bit more of a close-up, so you can literally see one post-it note has got boxes and crosses on it. This is nothing fancy, but it's using visual language to rapidly communicate lots of different ideas. Decide, a very stern looking person in that photo there. This bit's key. We've started with a broad problem space, and now we're narrowing down and funneling to make sure that we're going to get to the end of the week with valuable, useful, actionable insight. The outcome here is to make a decision on the prototype that we want to build and the journeys. There are techniques that you might use here, like Art Museum, and it sounds as it is. You have all of your solution sketches up on a wall or a virtual wall, and like in an art museum, you take time to introspect, to reflect, to review the options, and to sort of get a sense of where you're at. Which design floats your creative boat, floats your business objective, your customer objectives. Things like speed critique enable you to very quickly dot vote in a very short period of time to start getting a sense of where the combined team's perspective is at. You have to come to a solution, and I'm afraid to say that has to be the product manager. They will, of course, take input from the team, but it will normally be the product manager, or perhaps the sponsor might be involved in determining which solution you're going to prototype. Once that's agreed, we need to get into storyboarding. We need to get into expanding user scenarios and user journeys, so that we start understanding, start to finish, what the customer will experience, what we're testing for, how we're going to validate our hypotheses, and what stimulus we actually need to create. It's all very well having pieces of paper on a wall, but you have to shift this to something more akin to a digital product. So, of course, a prototype is always fake it before you make it. I've only got one picture here, which annoys me because I want to be consistent and have 3, but I couldn't actually find any others, unfortunately. But this just sort of alludes to what I said earlier. We'd made the decision around the kettle task. We'd mapped out what the how the customer is going to be behaving. We've also just marked here, this is the happy path. So we then also started to explore, well, do we need to validate any of the high priority unhappy paths? And given the variation in stock availability in practice, we did map a couple of those unhappy paths. I just don't have a shot of the whiteboard, sadly. Step 4, prototyping. I love this picture because I think it really, I wish I put a picture in of what the room looked like at the start of the week, because the room was empty. I mean, I'm not saying it's the most inspiring place, but it's a hell of a lot more inspiring than when we started. And this is really about, the outcome here is you have a viable prototype. The prototype's got to be disposable. It needs to be iterative. It needs to appear real, but we want to build just enough to learn and no more. So we're aiming for somewhere between low and high fidelity. The way you prototype is up to you. InVision, Figma, working code, whatever that looks like is down to the time you've got, the complexity of the prototype, and the skill set in the room. And then we need to be preparing like we would for any other customer interview, booking customers in. You want to try to between 5 and 6, engaging with your UX researcher if you've got one, framing your questions in the right way so that you try and weed out false positives and false negatives as much as you possibly can. Stage 5, validate. This is the crux of the sprint. You want to validate the prototype and look at the underlying testable hypotheses that link back to your risky assumptions. And we want to be observing, watching, learning together as a team. You start the week as a team, you finish as a team. You may want to think about iterating on the prototype throughout the day, but be careful doing that, because what you don't want to do is make so many changes that you water down the quality of the insight. But if after 2 or 3 participants something is just fundamentally broken, it is worth iterating to just see if you can get a change in sentiment, change in perspective for the subsequent participants. And then of course you get into the real work. Where do you go with it next? And I love these visuals because they're kind of a bit shaky. It's annoying me that we've got this space on the right hand side, but that's a prototype, right? It doesn't have to be perfect. And hopefully this just brings to life what I've described. We started at the start of the week with a listing page for webcams, and I'm conscious of I'm showing kettles, without any notion of whether or not there was stock available. We've ended the week with a prototype that may not be perfect, but it's starting to test some of our hypotheses. Now, how do we master the design sprint? What are the secrets? Well, day 0 and day 6, I've said are as important as 1 to 5. I actually think they're more important. Preparing for the sprint, getting the right people involved, being clear on the objective, getting the practicalities like rooms sorted out, making sure that you've got the right facilitation in place, figuring out how you're going to get and recruit customers. Critical. But day 6, the day after the sprint, where do you go next? Because the sprints have no value unless you move the learnings forward, unless you continue experimenting, unless you feed it into your continuous processes of discovery, unless you start to figure out, can I get a thin slice into production? Products have to do what products have to do, right? We communicate, we cheerlead, we coordinate. That's the job. The experts really are your best friends. I think sometimes we can butt heads a little bit with our stakeholders, but the experts are the ones that help you cover off blind spots. So think about involving operational colleagues, get marketing, sales perspectives. And it's a bit cheesy, but it's so true. I love product. It's fun. It's one of the reasons I do it. I hope it's one of the reasons you do it. We get to work with cool technology and really smart people to solve interesting problems. The sprint's got to be fun. It will be exhausting, but if it's not fun, something's really wrong. If you don't have fun sketching all day and having heated debates and seeing ideas go from paper to prototype, then you're probably in the wrong job. I love this slide mainly because it took me, I don't even know how many hours to dig this out from my emails, but on the left is what we prototyped, and on the right is what's live today on the Argos site. And yes, it doesn't look identical, but a lot of the principles that we prototyped back in that design sprint are there. Giving someone the ability to anchor around postcode, playing back whether or not the item was available based on that postcode, showing consistency of message on the detail page. It's all there. It's a lot tidier, obviously. But one of the things I wanted just to talk about, and I've got a couple of slides before we move on to questions, is that a design sprint is not a magic wand, and you won't go from design sprint to validated in production, making you millions of pounds overnight. The experience I had at Argos was this. Within 3 days of the design sprint, there was a noticeable shift in our approach to learning, our mindset. And that was not just in the sprint team, it was bubbling out across the product organization. After 5 days, there was a completely different energy and alignment around this problem. But it took 6 months before anything got into production in our apps. And it took another 3 years. I'd actually left the business before this was implemented on web. And there are good reasons why, and I'm happy to talk about that in the Q&A. But I suppose it's just setting expectations that depending on where you are in terms of product maturity and technology maturity, maybe you can get an experiment into production in 5 days. Maybe it will take you 6 months or 3 years. But without the design sprint, I don't believe that any of these outcomes would have been realized. And I do know from colleagues that are still in this that this was transformational. CSAT way up, no feedback coming through about availability, massive increase in product detail to trolley conversion, because of course customers were hitting these detail screens knowing already that they could get the product. So they were much more highly qualified, much further down the funnel. I'm conscious I'm running over slightly, so I'm just going to whiz through these. So what have I learned? What can you take away from my experience with the design sprints? It's not a magic wand, as I've said. I don't think anything ever is in our world. You won't please everyone, but hey, I think you're probably used to that being in products and design. And you can't solve every problem with a sprint. So what I don't want you to do is to take this away and think, I must run a design sprint. But if some of the conditions are right, I would encourage you to consider it as an option if you haven't already. And the reason I think you should do that is because the design sprint is about so much more than the framework. It's about the mindset. It's about you working with your squad, with your business partners. It's about collaboration. It's about focus and deep work and removing distractions. It's about being continuous in your approach. And it's about going very deep on important customer and business problems. The deck will be made available to you via Panache, or you can get in touch with me directly. There's loads of reading resources. If I can just highlight one to you, I would love to say that I'd created this, but it's been done. So I'm just going to have to accept that I was too late to the party. There is already a design sprint template in Miro. So you've got the link to that. I'd love to stay in touch. I talk regularly on LinkedIn about the topics I've already touched on. So don't be surprised if you see me talking a lot about culture, product management, and mental health. You can scan the QR code to get to my link tree, or I'm at Nicholas Jemetta or at Stories Matter on all of these channels. And I think I'm probably only just over the agreed time. So we're going to go into Q&A. And if I can just ask at the end of the Q&A, there's another little QR code. I'd love to get any feedback on how the session's gone so that Panache and I can continue to optimize these talks ongoing.
Okay, thank you so much, Nick. And just so you know, I'm a big fan of the QR code. Crazy.
I just wish I made it bigger.
Love it, so smart. Thank you so much. Thank you, Nick, for what you shared. So inspiring. Guys, do you have any question? Don't be shy, please.
I think you didn't mention that, but so I'm Ben, sorry.
Hi there, Ben.
Did you go back to users at the end, or you just stay with the people you started the sprint?
Sorry, can you say the question again, Ben? I missed it. You broke up a bit.
At the end of the sprint, do you go back to users and test the prototype, or you just validate among people you were with from the beginning?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I didn't mention that. So we tested with, I think, 5 or 6 customers on day 5 of the sprint. And one of the things I didn't put in my timeline slide was that after the sprint and before the app went live, which was 6 months, we were running continual product discovery. So that prototype I showed you went through, I mean, I've lost count of the number of iterations we went through as we continued to refine what we'd learned from the sprint and to continue testing the hypotheses that we weren't able to test during that 5th day. So customer insight continued to be at the heart of everything we did until the experience was shipped into production.
And last question, when did you decide to stop?
Stop which bit do you mean?
Iteration.
Okay. So the way that we measured the point to stop was that we ranked our hypotheses and we looked at their impact both on the business and on the experience. So once we'd got a certain way down the list and we were getting into hypotheses that were lower impact and were less likely to make or break the experience, that's when we proceeded with confidence to move into production. But as you'll know, even though you're in production, the iteration continued. It just continued less probably in prototyping and more in A/B testing.
Okay.
Thank you for the questions.
Thank you, Benoit. Thank you, Nick. We have 2 interesting questions on the chat. So I will start with the one from Blondine. Blondine would like to know, she's a product designer.
Yeah. Hi
She
there.
would like to know, how do you use the work you've done during the design sprint, and after the design sprint? Is this work, and I think she's talking mainly about the decision you made and the prototypes, are they pretty close to the final prototypes, or is there any rework on like creative work or things like that?
The nuts and bolts, and what I mean by that is the basic premise of the experience, which is I can, with a postcode on a listing page, I can see stock availability. That held true. But we must have gone through 20 or 30 iterations of the prototype, because then, as you'll know, you get into the really important details within the UI that in a design sprint aren't important. So you think
Mm,
about language, you think about placement, you think about how we're going to communicate that a product is in stock. Because you might have noticed in the prototype we use the word available. But what we found out during our testing was that just saying available was too vague. So we then had to pivot to say, well, we now need to be more specific about, is it available for a store collection or a home delivery? But as part of that exploration, we took it another stage further, which was to say, rather than just available for collection, we would say available for collection at 4 p.m. in Tottenham Court Road. And it's super specific, but you can imagine trying to play that out on a mobile view in thousands of product cards really was just too much. And we were sort of, um, we were overcomplicating the problem at
mm.
that stage. So, it's like a piece of elastic. I see it. You move too far one way, so you just have to rebalance and just bring that in the other way. But fundamentally, the only way you ever really know is by shipping to production and looking at your data and at your metrics.
Right. Thank you, Nick. I hope it answered your question, Blandine. And we have a nice question as well from Natalie. Natalie is wondering if design sprints are more for more mature organizations, or if it's something easy to implement as well in early stage startups. What do you think?
From my point of view, design sprints are uh, universal. I think it's less about the maturity of the business and more about the willingness to embrace these kind of discovery techniques. And I would argue that startups are way more willing to embrace it than when I was trying to pitch this at an enterprise that was still in the middle of a digital transformation. It's about willingness, it's about mindset. The budget, to be honest, is minimal. So I would say it's less about that and it's more about the type of problem that you're solving.
Right.
And some of the criteria that I showed earlier are some ways in which you can validate that. But I'm very happy to sort of take that offline and to give you a few more specifics, or to support you if there's a specific problem that you're framing around, should this be a design sprint or not.
Mm. Right. Thank you, Nick. And we have a new question from Aurélie, which is pretty linked to the past one from Natalie. Aurélie is wondering, how, like, what is the level of knowledge you need to have about your market, user, customers before starting a design sprint? Yeah, and I think this question is relevant if you are, like, for example, starting a business or starting a new product. Like, do you have to have collected enough information about users, or can you start having like maybe nothing, or really like a poor amount of information?
I think in my case, I was fortunate working for an enterprise. We had a lot of data available, and I'd spent time framing the problem. But that I think was more because the problem was quite political. So a lot of people had spent a lot of time trying to solve it and made no progress. So I'd come in with a different way of doing things. If you had absolutely no idea on customer market problems, I don't think a design sprint is going to yield the right value, because you'll probably end up spending more than a day trying to just map. But that's not to say that you can't use a design sprint if you've only got a lightweight view, or if you've got 80% of the view and 20% is fuzzy. Because don't forget that, as I said, a design sprint can be run in 5 days, but what I want everyone to take away is the mentality and the mindset of a design sprint. So just because you run it once, it doesn't mean that you can't do it again. It doesn't mean you can't do it again on a similar problem. It just might mean that you're not doing it in 5 days, and you can run a design sprint type approach in 1 or 2 days, for example.
Thank you. Is anyone else having a last question? I have one. If you don't, guys, I would love to give you the mic, so don't hesitate. Nobody?
No, they're all snapping away on their phones with the QR code. That's why.
Yeah, you're right. And happy I can ask my question. I wonder what are the levers to help you make a choice between using a design sprint to solve a problem or take a decision as a group, or using like a more classical discovery way of working. You see, like exploring problem and then exploring solutions. How can you make this choice?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think the way that you make the choice, you need to start with a problem. When a problem is very complicated, when there's lots of moving parts, when you're making no progress with the methods that you've described, or when it's highly politically charged, the reason that I favor a design sprint is because you short circuit all of that. Traditional discovery techniques are brilliant, and I work with a lot of teams on those type of techniques, but they do have a tendency, or they can have a tendency, to run on for a longer period of time than you might like before you see an outcome. What I love about a design sprint is you cut through all the noise, because you get into this zone of deep focus and deep work, and within a week you've probably saved yourself potentially weeks or months of work with those more traditional methods. So that's how I would make the decision. But as we've sort of spoken about before, Roxanne, all of these things live alongside in that sort of continuous product discovery toolbox. And it's really about experimenting with those techniques and figuring out, is this a design sprint? Is it not? If we run a design sprint and it doesn't work, why not? So it's very much about having that experimental, iterative mindset, even when it comes to these kind of techniques.
Cool. Thank you so much for your answer, Nick. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for having joined the session. For sure, you'll get this presentation. So you can go back to it. Do not hesitate to reach out to Nick on LinkedIn. Again, he's a pretty nice guy. Sure, you'll have like beautiful discussions again. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nick. Again, love the talk. So talk to you soon.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Sure.
Thanks, everyone. Nice to meet you all.